On today's show, I'm going to show you how easy it is to strip piece a design called Crossroads. Before we get to our quilting project, I'd like you to help me welcome a new guest on my show. This is Cynthia Scott. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Kay. It's nice to be here today.
Well, you've got such a great project to share with us.
I think I do.
Let's take a look at it. Okay. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, this is a little felt gift bag that I came up with. We always have a need for a little gift bag for either holiday giving or other seasons, other events. And I came up with this with Christmas theme with a snowflake and think snow. And I've got a cute little pair of gloves in there as a gift for my daughter.
All right, you mentioned other seasons for these bags, and you just brought some of these, and these are felt?
Yeah.
Look at the luscious colors.
Well, you know, the quilt stores now have such great collections of different colors of felted wool. And I thought it would be fun to turn a 9 by 12 inch piece of felt into a little gift bag. So that's what we came up with.
Okay, well, where do we get started?
Okay, so we start with a 9 by 12 piece of felt, which I have here. And we cut it into sections. This is a 4-inch wide piece that is 11.5 inches long. And this is the primary part of the bag, the front, the back, and the bottom. Then we have a 3/4 inch wide strip that we're going to use for the handle. Okay. And then we have 2 sides cut out for the little bag. So,
all out of our one piece of felt?
Right, all out of a 1 9 by 12 piece of felt.
Okay. What do we do first?
Okay, after we've cut our strip, we want to embellish the front of the bag. So to do that, we have our embroidery machine set up, ready to go, and I can step you through how I did the embroidery on this machine.
Great.
Okay, so we have our hoop with our fabric, and I did use some spray adhesive to get the felt onto my stabilizer, and then I went ahead and hooped it. And we have our screen set up with an A size hoop, which is what we have attached here. And I've already brought in the lettering, which is a built-in font called Typist on this machine. And I've spelled out Think Snow in our Typist font. Now what I'm going to do is bring in the snowflake design.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'll just load my design card into the machine. And we're going to select, as soon as it reads the design, we're going to bring in our design number 18. Now it comes into the screen, and we can actually move it with our finger to the position. Isn't that great?
Looks like fun.
It is. We can move it with our finger. We can also use our positioning arrows. I'm going to fine tune it with the positioning arrows. And we can also not only change the size, which I'll do here, I'll change the size, make the snowflake a little bit bigger. And we can even change the color of the snowflake.
To match the thread we want to use?
That's right, okay. That's right. So to do that, we have our snowflake selected. I'll touch color. And I will select white, so we have our whole design in that color. Now I can even change the background color to approximate the fabric color so that we don't waste time sewing and not have an idea of what it's going to look like.
Great idea.
So I'll touch my color button again. This time I'm going to select the fabric color, and let's see, we'll select another blue. And I've lightened it a little bit, so I have an idea what it's going to look like sewn out.
Good.
Yes. So when I'm done with my design on screen, I can go ahead and select OK, and it will now go into position, and I'm ready to sew. Push my start button and start my embroidery, and I'm sewing my design.
And the machine will take over, right?
That's right.
Okay, and how do we put the bag together after our design is sewn?
Very simple. We select a blanket stitch. In this case, I used a Parisian stitch. And I made the stitch width about 4.5 and used jean stitch in the top and the bobbin thread and sewed across to create the bottom part of the bag. And once I've done that, I would then take my handle piece, also sew down the handle, and it does get cut into 2 pieces, like this, for both sides. And then we need to attach the sides to the bag. So to do that, we would take our piece, take our side piece, put these together, sew down one edge, stop and pivot, sew down the bottom, and then the remaining side, and it would actually look like this when it's completed.
Okay, good.
Once we've done that side, we would turn it over, do the other side.
The same way?
The exact same way. And we take our little handles that we've cut in half and merely arc them, sew them about 3/4 of an inch from each edge, and we've got our little bag.
And the nice thing about the felt is it really doesn't need the edges finished.
It doesn't.
It's just decorated with blanket
Right,
stitch.
exactly. And we do put a line of stitching around the top to reinforce it. So we have our nice little bag. And the fun thing is, you really could make these for any occasion. I want to do some Easter bags.
Oh, fun.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yes.
In the Easter colors of some of the felt that we showed you.
Yeah.
Do some applique Easter eggs and some type and fill them with grass and candy. It would be a cute bag, too.
It would. Well, I want to thank you, Cynthia. This has really been great. A great project and great fun.
Thank you, Kay. It was fun to be here.
And I'll be right back with a quilting project. Now, I've called this design Crossroads because it looks like a design where 2 roads are crossing in the middle, coming together in like an X shape. And it's a great design for those large prints that we really don't want to always cut up into smaller pieces. So let's take a look at the fabric choices I've made for my quilt over here. It's done in shades of green and black. So first of all, I picked out the large print, and this is the one I'm going to be using today. It looks almost tie-dyed with some white spots here and there. That's going to be the central focus. And then I've picked colors from this to put into my quilt, and I always want a real dark fabric, and so I've chosen a black because there is black in this print. Then I want to progress down to some lighter fabrics. I knew I needed some green because there's so much green in there. So I picked a fairly dark green, and then a lighter green, and then white because of the white that's in here. Now, white is very difficult to use in a quilt, and I very seldom use a true white unless there is some already in one of the larger prints. Now, what I'm going to do is cut strips. And I already have these sewn together, but I have a 6.5 inch of the large print, 1.5 inches of the black on each side, 1.5 inches on the green, both greens, but then I've come to a 2-inch wide on the white strip, and it needs to be a little bit wider because of the way we're going to cut it. Now I've pressed my seam allowances so that they go away from this center, the focal point. And the next step is then to cut this strip. And the way I'm going to do that is to fold the strip. So we'll be cutting it folded So we have to come up with a way that will help us line up those seam lines so that the strip is actually straight and the seam lines on one side line up with the ones underneath. So I'm folding it, and then I'm going to take some pins. The way we're going to pin is to take a pin and pick a seam line, any seam line. I'm going to choose between the print and the black. Put a pin right in the seam line, lift it up, and chances are it's not going to be on the seam line on the other side, and that's why we need to pin it. So we'll just make an adjustment and move the fabric so it comes directly out. Then we'll take it back in this seam line, and because I had to move it, chances are it's not on the seam line, but it is. There, it has to come out that same seam line. Then we'll move along the strip and take another pin, another seam line. Let's go between the two greens. Just stick it in the seam line. Here we need to make just a slight adjustment. Back through. Okay. And let's just keep going, do about, 2 or 3 more. Let's go between the green and the black this time. And again, we need a slight adjustment. Take time with your pinning because that's going to be crucial in this project. And I think one more pin should do it. Let's go back to the black here. Another adjustment. And now we should be ready to cut our strip. And the way we're going to cut it is to take the Star Maker 8 and line it up here so that the point is at the raw edge of the strip. And down here the fold is toward me. But we're going to put the point right at the top of the strip. And I've got parallel lines here that need to stay parallel to the seam lines. Okay, we're in good shape here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Now you may need to move your pins a little bit if you put them right where you're going to cut. Okay, keeping it parallel, not moving it. I'm going to cut on this side. And look at the piece that we have after we unpin it. And that's one of the pieces for the center. Let's go ahead and cut another piece from here the same way. So we're moving down, the points here at the top, make our lines parallel. We want to come right off the fabric, right where we stopped cutting before. And cut one side. Cut the other side, and again we have another center, and the center of our quilt is going to be formed when these pieces, 4 of them, come together. I think you can see that in the center of this piece. Now let me just continue cutting here because we're getting other pieces as we cut. So I'm going to come down here just as if I'm going to cut another large piece, although if you take a look at it, after we have that lined up, you'll find I won't be able to get a complete piece out of here. But I want my lines parallel. I'm still going to cut it, the first part of it, because that completes this triangle that I'm cutting. Okay, we take the pin out. And now what we have are, I missed just a hair there. That's fine, that's close enough. Here we go with triangles like this. Now, let's take a look at this piece just for a minute. I have 4 of my centers. I'll just lay this on top, although obviously I don't think you'd put these colors in with this quilt. But you can see where the piece goes. And here's another one. Okay, and then after just 4 pieces are sewn together, it's a matter of adding triangles to finish the design. But we're going to do something a little bit different. If you take a look at this piece here, we have the 4 pieces in the center, and then out here we have 2 triangles. And those are the triangles that we've just cut in between our squares. You can see here, I'll just lay this down. They would go here and here. Okay, now those of you that are math people and have done a lot of cutting like this, I think something might be going through your mind right now, because this piece that we cut did not have a seam allowance between it. These two do. So these, when we sew them together, are going to be a little bit smaller. Well, we can take care of that because we want to use them for the design. We're going to take each one of our 4 center pieces that look like this, and on one side of each of them, we're going to cut off part of that point. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is to take a ruler. Let's use our bigger ruler here. And line it up. And I'm lining it up just so lines on the ruler come right on this black, the seam line between the black and the print. I haven't paid any attention to where we're going here. But what I want to do is cut off a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put the ruler there. Now, I think you can tell if I just use this ruler and place the 1/2 inch line at the point and tried to cut, chances are that wouldn't be the right angle. So I'm going to put this at the 1/2 inch. I'm going to move this ruler up, keeping my lines on the black. Remove this ruler and cut my piece. And you know, it really fools the eye because if you look at this piece, it looks like it's wider than a 1/2 inch, but it isn't. So we have one more piece we want to do that to. Just one point on each side. You don't want to do both sides, or then we have to make other adjustments. I come up with a different design. Okay, line that up. Line this up the 1/2 inch. Move this up. So we're using this ruler for the 1/2 inch measurement, this to keep it straight. Okay, we'll straighten that. Make sure that's on a 1/2 and cut the tip off. Okay, now we're finished with those rulers. Now let's go back to our pieces here. And we have 2 pieces. And what we want to do is to sew those 2 together just like this. So let's go ahead and do that. We shouldn't need any pins with this kind of a match. So I'm going to put right sides together. And you can see the seam allowances are going that way. And I don't want to fight the seam allowances when I sew these together. So I'm going to turn it over and start stitching here, right at the square piece, square end, and stitch. Stitch down part way. I do want my needle to finish down in the fabric. And then we're going to do what I call finger pinning. We're going to take these 2 seam lines, hold them together. You can see them right at the end, and you can also feel it with your finger. That's why I call it finger pinning. Hold those together until you get pretty close. Now, not too close. You know, we don't want you sewing over your fingers. And then release it and keep sewing. Then you come to your next seam, and we'll do the same thing. And if you can learn to finger pin accurately, it saves a lot of time doing the pinning. And really, it's a lot more accurate. But it's like anything else. You need to learn how to do it. So I've done the same thing with this seam. Then I'll match my ends and come off. And I would do the same thing with the 2 other pieces. So here we have part of our quilt. Let's take a look at where this would be. If I put it back on this piece, it would be right here. And another piece just like this, and it would finish the center of this quilt. But as I said, we're going to go on and play with our triangles. And so what we want to do is look at this piece and think about diagonal rows. So if I put this piece right here, you can see that I need a triangle on that side, just like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and sew that. I'll just right sides together. We'll look at the seam allowances. They're going this way. That tells us we'll start stitching here, and we'll do some finger pinning again. So line up those ends. And stitch. Give yourself a little bit of leeway in case you have to adjust where the finger pinning is going to be. So don't sew too far before you do that. Just put that, there we go. And again, the next seam. And one more. And we'll sew to the end. And then I want to show you something at this end, something that you can look for. Let's take a look right here. As I sewed it, these two pieces overlap, and where they overlap is where the seam should end. So that when we open it up, they're lined up. Okay, let's take a look at what this strip will look like when it's completely finished, because we do need to put another triangle here to complete that row. And I already have that sewn together. So here we have one of the rows. And remember, they are on the diagonal. So we have a row like this, and then another row like this. And you can see here where that end was cut off, it lines up perfectly with this angle and with this one. And the same thing over here. And that's what we want. So we have these two rows, and now we need to finish the two rows that square it up and that will give us this look, just like this. So let's take two of those triangles and sew them together. We'll make sure we have them lined up the way they should be. Look at the seam line. Again, it's the same kind of matching we've just done. So let's just sew these two together. And then our quilt is ready to sew together. Okay, we start at the square end. By now, if you've done this piece, you should be getting pretty good at finger pinning. Okay, here we go. And line it up. And our rows are finished except for our pressing. So we're going to go over and take a look and see how we'll do that. In order to make it easy to piece, see, that's going to go right there. To piece these together, we want seam allowances going in opposite direction. And it doesn't really matter. That means that on one of these rows, this one's already pressed, the seam allowance is going this way. It'll make it easy then if this one goes the other way. And then this one would go again toward this side. So let me press this. And what we want to do when we press it is first set our seam, very important, then press from the right side, which means I'm going to put my iron right here and just let the weight of the iron carry that seam in the direction it's supposed to go. And here we have our seam line. And then the piece down here would again go in the opposite direction. Now, along the way, if finger pinning is new to you, you need to check and make sure that you're matching exactly at the point. And if you're not, maybe you need to adjust your technique just a little bit, but it will come to you and it'll make it easier. So let's put this one here, get our seam allowances going in the right direction. That's good. And then this one went this way. Oh, this one I need to press the other way. That's just to make it easy on us. Whenever we can, we want our seam allowances going in opposite directions. Okay. Let's see how we're going to do this now. We'll just stitch them together. And here, if we put this right sides together, You'll see the seam allowances going in opposite directions. That's what we call an interlocking seam. It sort of pushes itself together and it'll be just fine. And we do all of our rows like this, sew them together, then the only thing left to do is to put on a border. So I think you'll really enjoy doing these kinds of projects. They look much more difficult than they are. And be sure and join me on my next show when I'll bring you some more quilting ideas.
For information on today's main demonstration, call 1-800-248-Kaye. That's 1-800-248-5293. Or write to us at Kaye's Quilting Friends, Post Office Box 456, West Branch, Michigan, 48661. Please remember to specify the program number. Kaye's Quilting Friends is brought to you in part by Janome America, Fiskars, Sulky of America, and Otlite Technology. Our thanks for joining us for this edition of Kaye's Quilting Friends. We hope the ideas shared with you in this program will make your quilting more enjoyable. Please join us again on the next Kaye's Quilting Friends.